Paranormal News, I'm Brad Bernards. Two similar photographs of flying saucer-style UFOs, allegedly taken recently over the city of San Agustin, Oaxaca, Mexico, have many UFO watchers interested because of its better than the average UFO photo clarity. It also has many who know their UFO history interested because San Agustin is also the name of the city in New Mexico where an alleged UFO crash occurred in July 1947, an event sometimes referred to as the Other Roswell incident because of its proximity in both time and location to the more famous one. The other, in San Agustin, New Mexico, is equally mysterious because of rumors of a live alien as well as alien bodies, crashed discs, and military threats to locals unless they kept quiet. The images of what looked like a flying saucer spread quickly on Twitter and on some Mexican media sites. While the clarity is obvious, the details are not. There's no information on the exact dates, who took the photos, time of day, description of movement, any other witnesses, etc. This pushes the needle on the skeptical meter to just a hair away from hoax. Using a new technique, scientists have performed the world's smallest magnetic resonance imaging to capture the magnetic fields of single atoms. It's an incredible breakthrough that could improve quantum research as well as our understanding of the universe on subatomic scales.
Electron spin resonance, which is similar to an MRI machine in a hospital, and this allows us to sense, to detect indirectly nuclear spins.
Lead author Dr. Philip Wilkie of the Center for Quantum Nanoscience. To bring the process down to much finer scales, the researchers used a scanning tunneling microscope. All they needed to do then was add pulses of radio frequency current, which allowed the sensors to detect the energy released by the electrons, producing an image of the magnetic field of a single titanium or iron atom. Find all of tonight's stories at paranormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernards, Paranormal News.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-Drift.
Contact, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is Tuesday night, July 9th on into the 10th. And tonight, we're going to look at the possibility of ET subject, our timeline from an academic and scientific approach tonight with Dr. Michael P. Masters. Now listen, we really need this, folks. We need more people like this. So tune in, give us more than half of your attention tonight, and give Dr. Michael P. Masters your support, because the more people like him that look into this subject, the more answers. And I believe at the very least, I feel we're going to get closer to being accepted in the scientific field of study and academia, given the right things fall into place. So could aliens Simply Be Us from the Future. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight with Dr. Michael P. Masters. This show is brought to you by Get the Tea at getthetea.com. The webinar is Monday night, 5 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you sign up so you can get some exclusive coupons from Get the Tea, and also you'll get a chance to win free stuff, because you never know. Depending on Ronnie McMullen's mood, you never know what he's going to give away. Also, this show is brought to you by Ancient Life Oil, the best CBD oil on the planet, and preparewiththefringe.com. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. You can support the show by donating, going to one of our sponsors, or using the Amazon portal. And if you can't do any of that, just simply share and like the show or leave a review. We've got some pretty good reviews. I think out of all the reviews, there was just one person that left us a negative review, and it really wasn't about the show. It was about the subject matter. And speaking of the subject matter, if you have a UFO you'd like to report, go to ufoseekers.com. First and foremost, go to their channel, youtube.com/UFO Seekers. If you want to look at this from a journalistic point of view, that's the most important thing. If you've had a sighting and you live somewhere out in the west or southwest, give them a call at 661-UFO-7889 or contact them on the website at ufoseekers.com. Tomorrow night on the program, our friends from Grimerica will be joining us, and I'm pretty sure I got the timeline right this time. And I believe Thursday night, Art Funkhauser is going to be with us with a really deep and even scientific look into the deja vu experience. And Friday night, it's open lines again with Jeff Harmon. And in our third hour tonight, I've got a surprise for you. So you want to stick around in our third hour tonight. Big surprise, actually. So make sure you stick around for this. But in the first part of the show tonight, we're going to have Dr. Michael P. Masters is with us, and he is a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Tech in, I think it's Butte, Montana, and he received a Ph.D. in anthropology from the Ohio State University in 2009, where he specialized in hominin evolutionary anatomy, archaeology, and biomedicine. And over the years, Dr. Masters has developed a broad academic background, which began studying physics and astronomy at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, with further undergraduate and graduate coursework in astrobiology, statistics, astronomy, and physics, as well as a perennial review of developments in modern physics regarding time and time travel. Now, collectively, Dr. Masters' background, education, and current research program combine to offer a unique perspective and a novel approach to addressing unanswered questions pertaining to a widely recognized yet poorly understood aspect of modern global culture. His new book is the topic tonight, Identified Flying Objects, a multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomena, which challenges readers to consider new possibilities while cultivating conversations about our ever-evolving understanding of time and time travel. Now, the website is IDFlyOBJ. So it's IDFLYOBJ.com. The links are going to be there as well in the show notes. You can follow them on Twitter at MorphoTime on Twitter and Facebook.com IDFlyOBJ. Dr. Masters, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can't wait to get into this one.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, I love it when I get this kind of person on the show. Like my first experience with that was Robert Schock, and I'm starting to get really excited about these things because the more people in academia that get involved in this stuff, I mean, it's kind of validating for us that over here, I guess on this side, because that's the way we feel, like we're over here on this side of society. But it's validating for us to see people like you with such a good background in education that are writing books and saying, hey, look at this. No, I mean, really look at it and look at the evidence. So thank you for that.
No, I know what you mean. It's funny because a lot of people have a lot of important things to say about it, but you're right. If you don't have those letters by your name, or you don't have a real good scientific perspective or some sort of credentials, a lot of people don't take you seriously. And I think I understand it, but I also think that that's a detriment to a phenomenon like this. We should listen to people that do have things to say that are rooted in something and that are tangible. You can latch onto them. There's evidence involved. But no, I appreciate that introduction. It's been fun as a scientist to not only talk to people about this that know about it and know this is a real thing, but also to sort of challenge some of my academic colleagues to start opening their minds a little bit and to start realizing that this is something that we do need to get into. Just like you said, we all need to start taking a look at this more seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to me that we get more people that are serious about this. And do you feel, because I know it's hard to, and that's something I wanted to ask you about, was it hard to write about this given your background and education? Were you hesitant about writing a book about aliens and our timeline based on, your colleagues and your scholarship or your scholarly background? Was it hard for you?
I mean, it's funny because I went to college for this. I've been interested in this since I was very young, but recently, once I got to the point where I was actually gonna do it, I was a little nervous. Like I considered maybe doing it under a pen name or a pseudonym, or maybe even I don't know. Just I didn't know. I didn't know what the response would be. I didn't really know how to really do this. But what I decided, I mean, I spent 7 years writing this book, and I basically came to the conclusion that the 7 years I spent working on this were important enough, and the research and the evidence that was brought forth in this book were important enough that I just needed to own it. I needed to do this. So I said, screw it. Who cares what the response is? We need to start having a conversation about these things. And I feel like this is a testable theory. It's a falsifiable theory. And that, from a scientist's point of view, is important. We need to have things that we can test, that we can actually look at and get behind, that aren't just wild speculative ideas. And this is something that we can wrap our heads around from the scientific side of things. But even beyond that, it brings together a perspective that draws from different fields that are all very complementary. Like you can look at what we know from astrobiology. You can look at what we know about the different planets in the universe and the distances among them, and the physics involved in traveling from star to star, or traveling forward and backward in time. And the anthropology, as an anthropologist, obviously that was the big thing. But bringing all of those together and seeing what was written, and it wasn't just me. Like I had a lot of collaborators, I had research assistants, I had peer reviewers, I had beta readers, and seeing the final product, I said, yeah, I will absolutely stand behind this. And I'm glad I did, because I really enjoy the conversations I have with people about the content of the book, and I think there's a lot of ways it can continue to move forward.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the book this isn't just another like UFO book or somebody talking about cases. Now you do bring up, because I've got your audio book. I got that quick as soon as I was on your website, and I was like, Audible? Oh yeah, that's happening. Right?
I love Audible. It's so fun.
So I got the book, and it was you actually reading it, which is even better to me. But it's not another UFO book, even though there are cases that you cite in there, but only for the reasons to talk about this subject of, is it possible that there are ETs or other life forms that, I don't know, have some type of effect on our timeline right now? And what that effect could be was fascinating, because I haven't finished the book, but you start getting into certain conversations about, well, are we kind of planted here? Are we actually the past of future beings? Are we evolving into what we would consider like an original gray, what they look like? And I know in your book you'd mentioned when you were young, you picked up the book Communion by Whitley Strieber. And I don't know how old you are, by the way, but that's the one book that most of us, when we look at it, we say, okay, that's what an alien looks like. That's what an ET looks like. But there are thousands of reports of the same thing. And I think we don't consider just how many reports there are to be evidence sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I think it's important. Like I say in the early chapters of the book, I'm not a ufologist or a ufologist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I look at everything critically, and there's clearly something happening, and I think it needs to be talked about. And the way I approached it, was from primarily an evolutionary standpoint. Like, what is it about these reports, and it doesn't hinge on that. The actual model, the actual hypothesis is that we will eventually become them, and that's a testable thing. All we have to do is continue existing, and then we find out, or not. We die, and we still find out, unfortunately, that way. But even after taking that out, even disregarding that for the time being, if we can take seriously these reports, and I think we should, because there's so many people throughout the world, thousands and thousands of cases of people seeing things in the sky, and they report the same thing consistently. The abduction accounts, I think, should also be taken seriously because they're describing the same things. And of course, there's exceptions to that. We need to account for those, and we need to also acknowledge that there are things that don't fit this saucer-shaped craft or this disc-shaped craft, these humanoid beings. There are exceptions, but for the most part, when all of these people are describing the same thing, we should absolutely take that seriously. And I'm trying to present a model that helps to explain as many facets of these experiences as possible, and looking at it from the context of a multidisciplinary approach, the different fields that can help us understand why it's unlikely that we'll have another humanoid being, another upright walking, big-headed, big-eyed, small-faced being evolve on another planet that just happens to be there at the exact same time as us, that happens to be on a planet close enough to us that they could find us and traverse the vast distances between to come here. And then why would they not get out and say hello? Why would they not meet the president or prime minister of some country? But they do things that are almost identical to what I would do as a paleoanthropologist, someone who studies hominin evolution and our human past, if I had time travel technology. So looking at those things, looking at the physics of time and astrobiology, all of these things seem to suggest some sort of intertemporal, or what I refer to as an extratempestrial rather than extraterrestrial sort of phenomenon.
And I want everybody to know that's this, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but let's be clear about the education. Paleoanthropology is seeking to understand early human development anatomically, right? And that's what that is, or the reconstruction. I actually looked it up, of evolutionary kinship lines with the family homina and all that. And you've got a practice in that, or study in that, biological anthropology, archaeology, which everybody knows what that is, and even biomedicine. So the fact that you're even considering this stuff is, I don't think you know, for somebody like me, just how big it is, because I'm a nerd, man. Like, this stuff is big to me, you know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Your research was spot on. So, like, I knew when I was young that I wanted to study this. And like you said in your intro, I was initially looking at the physics and the astronomy side of it. What about space? What about planets? What about time and time travel? But what really interested me more than anything was our own history. And you're right, paleoanthropology is the study of humans, us now, and our hominin ancestors, which includes all of our what we call bipedal ancestors. So any of our ancestors that walked upright. Because what happened is 6 to 8 million years ago, we shared a common ancestor with what eventually became the chimpanzee. We weren't chimpanzees, but we were more chimpanzee-like. They didn't evolve to the same extent that we did. They still retained a lot of those, what we call ancestral traits. So we started walking upright, and when that happened, two main changes took place. We stood up, and if you picture a chimpanzee just standing up, it's going to be looking at the sky because it's used to a more horizontal orientation. So our heads rotated down, and as our heads rotated down, what that did is it moved our faces back, and it flexed what's known as the basicranium, the part of the skull where the brain sits. There's the anterior, which is toward the front. It sits right over top of our eyes. There's the middle basicranium, where our temporal lobes sit, which are kind of close to our ears. And then the posterior basicranium, where the big hole that connects with our spinal column sits. So as that part flexes, as it comes down and toward each other, and what I usually use as a way of representing this is a slinky. If you think about a slinky, and we actually refer to this as the slinky hypothesis because it's much easier to conceptualize. If you think of the front of the slinky in your left hand as the face, and the right hand, the back part of the slinky, as the posterior cranial base where your spinal column goes, and you pull those toward each other, what happens to that slinky? It opens up all this space on the top. And that's exactly what happened to our skulls. As our faces retracted and our foramen magnum, that part at the bottom of the skull where the spinal column is, as that came down and forward, it opened up all this space in the top of our skulls where we started to grow a larger and larger brain. And that's why chimpanzees still look more like the ancestors, because they stayed quadrupedal. They stayed walking on four limbs, so they never had that need to rotate their faces down. And so the fact that we're bipedal, we walk on two legs, that happened 6, possibly as early as 8 million years ago, and that set in motion all kinds of other changes. The fact that we can use our hands to type on computers and to make tools and to do all of these things that are so important to humanity is also a result of bipedalism, walking upright. So a big argument I make in the book is that if this very unique characteristic of humans, which we still struggle with, there's all kinds of problems associated with walking upright. We have bad necks, we have bad backs, we have bad knees, we have hernias all the time. Childbirth is very difficult. We have hemorrhoids, we have varicose veins. We're struggling with all of these things on this relatively small planet. What if we have another planet where there happens to be intelligent life and it's larger than ours? They have gravity that's more than 9.8 meters per second squared. They're most likely not going to be bipedal. It's very, very rare on this planet. It's going to be even more rare on another planet. So we wouldn't expect to see a bipedal alien creature, an extraterrestrial that happened to be bipedal. So that I think is a very important thing to keep in mind in the context of this phenomenon.
So from a scientific standpoint, or just a logical standpoint, you're saying, okay, in our minds, we see all these beings as all these alien beings out there in the universe. We fantasize that they're all bipedal creatures of some kind, but looking at biology and gravity and things of that nature, it's probably not as probable as we would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have this idea that the universe is teeming with life, and it probably is. I have no qualms with that at all. It's probably very full of life. But yeah, to have something that looks so much like us, and like I've said 100 times, if UFO reports, if abduction reports were describing squid creatures or spider monsters or something that had 100 legs or no face, but they're almost always humanoid. They're almost always a slightly more evolved version of us. They have the same traits as us. They're bipedal. They walk upright. They have slightly larger heads and slightly smaller faces and slightly bigger eyes. And those are the main trends that have taken place throughout our own evolution over the last 6 to 8 million years. So it makes more sense that they're just simply us from the future rather than an organism that underwent a very different evolution on a different planet somewhere else in the universe, a different solar system with different gravity, a different chemical composition. Who knows if they even had dinosaurs or anything that died before them that allowed them to come out. So it's a simpler model that looks at how we are now, how we've been in the past, what we're likely to look like in the future based on that past, and then just ties it all together.
Yep, you're definitely tapping into my nerve strings here, or to my nerd strings. So yeah, because when we look out in our solar system, I've read a lot of books that say, well, man, there's beings on the moon and this and that. And look, I get that people think that NASA's lying and all this stuff, but I'm not a huge conspiracy guy either. But based on a lot of scientific research, there are no biological beings in our solar system. I mean, even saying that, I'm sure to you is probably kind of ridiculous, but there's people that believe that. They believe that they are biological beings with consciousness, sentient biological beings, bipedal beings that live in this solar system. And there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it's a very important thing. And I think that I'm actually giving a talk at the 50th anniversary MUFON conference down in Irvine, California in a couple weeks. And this is a big part of the talk is trying to draw that line. And it's being drawn. I'm not the only one doing this. There's others that are also making this a reality. And it's an important thing for us. Like you said early in the show, that you're excited that there's more academics getting involved and that we're lending credence to the study of this phenomenon because it deserves to be so. But what we need to do more than anything else is to draw a distinction between science and belief, between evidence and a belief system. And I mean, there's some things that can't be known, and it's important to acknowledge that. Some things can be supported by scientific research and evidence. However, some things exist solely as a belief system. And that's okay. Like, people believe much crazier things than anything we're talking about tonight. There's some wacko beliefs out there, but that's fine. If you want to just believe, then that's fine. But if you want to know, if you want to have evidence, if you want to have actual knowledge about a situation, then you kind of have to start asking questions and saying, well, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why there's not bipedal creatures on Mars or the moon or on Jupiter or living under Antarctica. There's just no evidence for that. And we can still understand this phenomenon in the context of research and evidence. And it's not just, my MUFON talk is not just calling out UFO people. It's not just calling out ufologists. It's also calling out scientists, because we also have to acknowledge some sort of bias. And we've dismissed this for too long. We have, and it's unfortunate because it's something that now I think even more so in the last few weeks, the last few months, is really starting to become a mainstream conversation. And I think we are to blame in a large part for ignoring that, for not taking the wheel when we should have been. But at the same time, we were also used as agents in a divide and conquer strategy. We were used to dismiss people's actual encounters and to say, oh, that's a weather balloon. Oh, that's a weather balloon. I mean, that's what we were employed in that role, going back to some of my colleagues, former past colleagues at Ohio State University, if I can use former past colleague as a way of linking myself to them. I didn't exist at the same time they did, but I walked the same halls as them. Battelle University, Battelle is actually, I can't get into, that's top secret, but Battelle is right next to Ohio State, and a lot of scientists came from there.
Well, hold on a second. You got top secret stuff going on out there. You can't just say that and stop, brother. It don't work like that. I mean, you said it. Is there some research going on out there we don't know about, or what?
Yeah, Battelle's always been and that's, I guess it's top secret, only what they do, but everybody knows about Battelle. They're a huge organization. My brother-in-law actually works at Battelle. He can't talk about what he does, and I respect that. But it's right next to Ohio State. And it was so cool to start reading about J. Allen Hynek, because he was recruiting people from Battelle, which is literally right there. Like, the Olentangy River runs down. There's the Horseshoe Stadium, go Bucks. And then it keeps going, and then boom, there's Battelle. It's right next to Ohio State. And there's some amazing research going on there, and there has been for a long time. And they do defense work. They do a lot of things nobody's allowed to know about. But that area produced some of the earliest scientists that were used to quell discussion about this phenomenon. They were used in this divide and conquer tactic to keep people from talking about UFOs and to dismiss everything everybody said. So that needs to be acknowledged too, that scientists were used in this way, and a lot of the dismissal of what we do and a lot of the hatred toward us, and I feel some of this from the UFO community, is because we were agents in this dismissal discourse. We were used to try to just tell everybody it's all weather balloons or flocks of birds or gaslights or whatever. And I understand that. And we need to get past that too. It's not just on the UFO community to get past scientists. It's not just on scientists to get past all the speculation and unfounded claims on the UFO side. But we do need to acknowledge that.
It's
we
on
need
the
to
military largely and the government largely. But science could definitely help us for sure.
Yeah, and you can understand the military's role in this. You can understand why they would want to keep things quiet and why, if they did actually acquire something, why they wouldn't talk about it. If that gives them a leg up over their competitors, future enemies, current enemies. We're in the middle of a Cold War. The World War II just ended. We just nuked Hiroshima, for God's sakes, and then we acquired technology from tens of thousands of years in the future. Hell yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Why would we ever talk about that? It'd be stupid to tell anybody we had that.
Exactly. Well, I think this is the discussion tonight, too, and we're going to get into that right when we come back with Dr. Michael P. Masters about his book, and the subject of aliens simply could be us from the future. Is that scientifically even plausible? That's what we're going to be talking about when we come back. We're with Dr. Michael P. Masters. Stay with us.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Roop, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
So, have you heard of heavy metals? I'm not talking about the heavy metals in the junkyard. I'm talking about the heavy metals that build up in your body. Heavy metals in your body can make you feel sluggish, fatigued, and just plain off. Why not try Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com? Cleansing your body and making you feel great. No, not cleansing the outside of your body, but cleansing the inside of your body of intruders that sneak their way into you and set up an intruder camp. Life Change Tea helps remove unwanted intruder camps. Brew it, steep it, and drink in the results. Tastes great, so you can create a new health habit. Our tea loves to help people. It just needs the chance. So order yours today by logging on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our Life Change Super Strength Tea is waiting. This could be a beautiful relationship. Take charge of your health. Order at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, The Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, my old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheTea.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website, thefringe.fm, to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're here with Dr. Michael P. Masters, and we are looking at the ET and alien subject again, but we are actually looking at the subject from the point of view of our timelines and evolution, possibly even time travel, and what the grays, or this thing that we call grays, what these bipedal creatures that a lot of people say that they have encounters with, or beings, could they be us in the future, or could they just be related to us in a timeline sort of way? And it's very confusing. If you I'm real quick to confuse myself on this, but if I understand correctly, Doc, I don't know why every doctor I ever have, I call him Doc. I watch Back to the Future too much, I think.
Yeah, but you can just call me Mike.
Mike, there you go. So what you're saying is that it's possible that what we call the grays, what all these people are that are having an experience with these gray beings, with the big eyes, the flatter face, could be a future us. First and foremost, I want to get that clear, that could be possible.
Well, I would go a step farther and say it's not just the grays. And a big part of understanding this aspect of the argument is the grays are more recognizable. They have slightly bigger heads, slightly larger eyes, slightly smaller faces. The Nordics, too, they even have hair still kind of bigger eyes, usually blue. But beyond that, we start to get into features that are almost non-human, but they're still upright walking beings that have very similar characteristics to a human, but they're just almost unrecognizable. So one of the best ways I think to frame that aspect of the phenomenon is to think about how if we went back from right now, the year 2019 to the year 1819, other than our clothes and our cell phones and anything else we had, we're still going to look very much like those beings from 1819. You go back 20,000 years into the past, now you're starting to see some physical traits that are different. You go back 200,000 years in the past, and now you're at the time of the Neanderthals, and the Homo floresiensis existed, these tiny little hobbit things that existed on the island of Flores until very recently. Go back to 1.5 million years ago with Homo erectus, and they have very big faces, giant teeth, large eye orbits, brow ridges, low sloping forehead, and they look very primitive. We would look like aliens to them. We would have a rounded head and a small face and big eyes with no giant eye socket protruding out of our face. And so the fact that we would look like that to them in this time period also kind of indicates that if we continue these same long-term evolutionary trends into the future, if they came back from these very distant periods of the future, that we would still recognize them as hominins, but they would look, they would almost look reptilian or insect-like to us. They would have even more divergent characteristics, elongated, skinny bodies and big heads and big eyes. And so it's not even about speculating what's going to happen to us in the future or what we will look like based on some nuclear holocaust or living on the moon or something like that. But just if we continue these same trends forward in the same way that we can look back into the past and see what we would look like to our ancestors, a lot of the things even beyond the grays would likely be things that we would call, very, very different, but still hominin. And I refer to this in the book as temporal ancestry. The word ancestry has replaced race because there's no such thing
didn't
as
you call them
extratemporals
or something like that?
Yeah, extratempestrials.
Extratempestrials, that's right.
Yeah, so that word tom, it's the French word for time, replaces terre, which is the Latin word for Earth. So extraterrestrial means outside of Earth. Extratempestrial in this context means outside of time rather than outside of Earth. And yeah, but that's referring to the whole phenomenon, regardless of where they're from. But in looking at the variation across time, like what we might see, and we could potentially see very different beings from a distant point in the future who, with time travel technology, could pick up someone from a more recent time, even a couple hundred years in our future. They could pick up a Norwegian just to mess with us. They could pick up something from a long time ago, a Gigantopithecus, and plop them down to make it seem like there's a Bigfoot somewhere, even though it comes from the past. There's a lot of potentialities there. I'm not saying this is happening.
No, I'm with
you. But Bigfoot has been seen in the context of UFOs. That's maybe not as outlandish as it could be. But no, my point is that if they have that technology in the future, if there's some point where we develop the technology to travel backward in time in the future, we're not just going to get rid of it. In the same way that we invented fire, we invented agriculture, and then we didn't just burn all of our Bic lighters, ironically, because we'd have to burn them with Bic lighters to get rid of fire. We didn't get rid of agriculture. We still have these things into the future now. We didn't get rid of tools. Our computers, our cell phones, everything we have, our wrenches, our socket wrenches, are the direct descendants of the first stone tools 3.3 million years ago. When we first started to make tools, we kept improving upon them and making them better and better and better. And we can see that happening faster now. We can see an acceleration happening now.
You know, there's a whole philosophy behind what you're saying, man.
Yeah, go for
it. That a lot that's actually taught in philosophy. Well, people like Manly P. Hall and others that have looked into the esoteric things about history, and and kind of like sun worship and stuff. I'm sure you've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
There is an understanding of natural law. And, you know, a lot of people think some of these mystery schools are all about mysteries and magic powers, but it's really an understanding of natural law, right? And using those facts and going in the past, and it kind of what Kubrick was showing in his film would make sense, would be plausible, right? But one of the things that I wonder about, because you've got such an extensive background on your education with this, is the shapes of the skulls you were mentioning earlier. How carefully have you looked at the shapes of the skulls, like each side of the skull? If it was to keep evolving, would it actually, I mean, how close would it be to what we are calling aliens or ETs if it did that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So my actual field of study is what's known as craniofacial evolutionary anatomy. I mentioned I study hominin evolutionary anatomy, but my dissertation was written on craniofacial anatomy, and that's the top of the skull, the neurocranium, the midfacial region, which is our eye orbits and our upper nose. If you've ever broken your nose, it's that part right between the eye orbits, and then the lower face, which is the mandible, your jaw. And my dissertation was both on the evolution of those things and also modern human variation across different groups. So what does the skull look like in sub-Saharan Africa or East Asia or among Native Americans or among Pacific Islanders or Australians, and comparing all of these different groups. And that skull shape, I think, is even more important than brain size, because we have this idea that the brain just keeps growing and growing and growing, but actually over the last 10,000 years, our brain size has decreased. And that's happened in concert with an overall decrease in body size. We've been getting smaller, but it's more about shape. And in chapter, I think, 10 of the book, I actually do what's known as a geomorphic morphometric analysis to look at how that shape changes between males and females. If you morph the skull in this morphometric space between a male and female, which is a trend that a lot of people aren't aware has been happening, we've become more feminized, we've become more gracile, and have taken on more traits of females in recent times, mostly since agriculture. We've domesticated ourselves in the same way that we have dogs and foxes and cows and sheep and everything else. But as we do that, the shape changes. It's not about size necessarily, it's the shape change. And we've become more feminine in the shape of our craniofacial anatomy. And if that continues into the future, and what I show through this geometric morphometric analysis is that if that continued, we would expect to see something that's very similar to the craniofacial architecture of these gray aliens, as you call them, these really, and I hate to say big-headed. I've been using that term throughout this interview, but it's what we call neurocranial globularity. It's a rounder skull. It's a bobble-headed type thing, where we have this big thing sitting on top of a small thing. And one of the analogies I use in the book is if you try to put a camper on top of a Corvette, it's not going to work. If you look at dogs, domesticated dogs are a great example. If you look at a Doberman Pinscher or a German Shepherd, they have these long projecting faces and these really low sloping foreheads. But if you look at a pug or even a Labrador Retriever or a Chihuahua, they have these tiny faces and these big rounded neurocrania. And it's that same thing. It's that trade-off. So it's not just about size. It's also about shape. I'm really glad you brought that up, actually.
Yeah. And I wanted to explain that. And, you know, I'm sure there's scientific terms for all of this stuff, but I just wanted to let people know that you looked into that, you know, that's
it
what
was
you
my
looked
dissertation,
into.
for God's sakes. That's what I studied more than anything else.
So here's another question I got. In your book, you talk about confirmation bias, which I've been, I'll just admit it, I've been guilty of it, right? I've had a lot of theories about the esoteric, the occult, all kinds of things, and just started looking at all types of evidence, seeking out evidence that would confirm what I thought was true, basically, and negating or not even paying attention to, not really negating, but just not focusing on anything else. Did you take that into consideration? Like how hard was that for you to do that when you were studying this?
I think that's the best question that could ever be asked about anybody ever, honestly.
Thank you.
We all know, I'm serious. That's an awesome question. Like there's a lot of things in that book, and I think you focused on one that's really important because we all do this. We're all guilty of this. We all look at something and say, well, no, I'm finding the things that make sense to me or the things that feel right to me.
Or you hear that phrase, my truth. What is that?
Yeah. It's a belief system. It's tribalism. It's feeling something just because you want it to be. So no, I actually I'm looking to the right of me right now. I have they're very strange, but I have a bunch of printouts of logical fallacies. The 10 Commandments of Logic is one of them. What's this other one say? Robots should take over the world because, which is a whole list of logical fallacies. Like I have tried to stay true to not only science but also a non-biased approach. But I think we could all benefit from that so much, not just in looking at this phenomenon, but in everyday life, like to see flaws in our arguments, or at least to have the bravery, the cojones to say, oh, wait, I might be wrong about something. And that's a huge thing. Like I was talking about that MUFON talk and how I'm trying to call myself out and scientists out and ufologists out and these speculative ideas. What fuels those more than confirmation bias? That we're just looking for things to confirm what we already think. We should all be doing that all the time. And so it's been a huge thing for me since I began this. Like, is there an argument I'm making that's just a biased argument? And I think a big part of how we get around that in science is by having peer reviewers. We have people that are there to cross-check everything we do. And some things can get through that. I try to self-check and then have peer review so that just in case I missed anything, somebody else would be there to call BS and say, no, wait, you're going down a rabbit hole. This is a tangent. You want this to be true, so you just argued this for these reasons. And I hope that the readers of this book understand that fastidiousness, that commitment to really trying to avoid any sort of logical fallacies or any sort of confirmation bias. And if they find them, I really hope they write me too, because I am.
That's not easy.
I've called this an evolving project from the beginning, and it's always evolving. And if there's anything that people find that they say, oh wait, he wants this to be true, so he's arguing it for this reason, I would welcome that criticism. I honestly would.
I bet you would, yeah. Because I bring that up because you made it a point specifically in the beginning of your book, and about confirmation bias, to let us all know that you're aware of it, and then you took it into consideration when you did this research. And in my experience, when people do research on these topics and they try not to get too involved in their own confirmation bias, the rest of the community doesn't give them a lot of praise, man. It's not fun. Like, I know you were saying you're going to MUFON, but I don't know how well they're going to accept your reports, honestly. You know, it's like, it just depends on who's in the audience. Although I do know somebody that, like, from UFO Seekers, like Tim Doyle, who would gladly talk to you about all these things, but a lot of people don't like him because he doesn't confer to a lot of people's beliefs, you know. But then again, we have to think about people are emotionally involved into disproving things too, which is something else I've realized. They're emotionally involved in trying to call people frauds or saying that this guy's a fake or that. And some of them are even called skeptics, right? But they're not really skeptics, because after a while they start revealing themselves that no matter what you show them, no matter what evidence you show them, it's not good enough for them. And I talked to Nancy Trivelato about this, and she studies consciousness in an organization in Brazil and Portugal, that it's harder for her as a scientist when it comes to giving evidence than it would be if, say, she was just doing a simple scientific project on medicine or biology. Because she's studying something esoteric or relatively esoteric to our society like consciousness, then the scientific community is much harder on her when it comes to terms of evidence. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's good. That's what we do in science. Like I was mentioning that peer review process earlier. What we do is submit papers, and then this group of usually 3, sometimes 4 people just really hound you on it and criticize everything you did. And that's good. That's a good thing. That's good for the process of discovery. And that's why I ended the last overly long dialogue. I got a little wordy there. How this is a good thing. I want people to try to identify points of bias, and we can learn so much more from having conversations. And there isn't that. There's no peer review in ufology, and there should be. There should be somebody calling BS, or all of us collectively should be calling BS if somebody doesn't have evidence to back something up. There's a lot of talking heads that make money by going to these conferences. There's a lot of people that sell books that are just nothing. There's no evidence to back them up. And there is a division there. Yeah, your friend that you talked about, he's catching some of that. I'm catching some of that. But if we're going to actually get to the root of this phenomenon, we need to keep going and put those people to the sideline. We need to get rid of these people that are just making money off of telling people whatever the hell they think they want to hear, and start actually having evidence-based explanations for things. I think that's a huge part of what ufology is going to be going forward.
Well, now I'm probably going to take a break here, because what I was going to ask you next is what actually can be tested in the field of what you do, like alien races, looking into this, ufology, things like that. How limited are we to begin with when it comes to testing, and just how effective that witness testimony is, because that's something that I think we need to talk about. But we'll go ahead and we'll stop here. And if you guys also listen, before we go into break, at the website at lightingthevoid.com, I put the speak pipe thing back up there. So if you go to the contact page, there's a thing in the middle that says get on the air, and you can get on the air just by simply hitting the button and recording, and I'll do all the production work. I'll make you sound really good, and you'll get heard on the air, just like Elle and Kat and all the others that have done that. We'll be right back with Dr. Michael P. Masters.
Right now we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonderlight Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Ahoy there, Gigi here from Shift Happens. Do you like to boogie down to topics such as ufology, the occult, and the mysteries behind our reality? Well, I invite you to join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, as we like to punch that curiosity button and tickle that fancy. We tickle that fancy, but yeah, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but there's certainly a lot of tickling going on over here at Shift Happens.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, They are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I am your host, Joe Roop. Don't forget the show is here for you weeknights, 9 p.m. Pacific to midnight. And after the broadcast, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable is on. And I got to say, too, our weekend programming on the Fringe FM has really been kicking ass, just to be honest with you. Jeremy, all the fellas on the weekend, Michael Deacon, Love, Sex, and the Hidden Agenda that comes on, their new podcast that comes on. And if you're listening to this show, all of these shows are archived as well. But the cool thing about listening live is sometimes they give away stuff. Sometimes things happen live that you're not going to get on the podcast version. No offense to the podcasters out there or anything. But anyways, we're here with Michael P. Masters, Dr. Michael P. Masters, and I am fascinated with the subject. As I said before, it touches my nerve strings or nerd strings. I keep mixing that word up because I think a lot of us have thought about this. We just don't bring it up. You know, it's like it is plausible. Like, where do these aliens come from, or what are we going to look like in the future? Are we going to evolve into what they look like now? And some people even think, and I've heard this, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. And it's a very wild theory, but that we were created, I don't know how to explain this, that we were created by the future race of aliens because that's what we are going to be anyways, so that they can study who they are, where they came from. Didn't you talk about that, right? If that could be a possibility.
Well, I talk about it, but not necessarily in the context of it being a possibility. I think it's important to talk about because people do think that. But one of the problems with that is that it implies that there was almost a separate creation, or there was some history of humanity that reached a point of advanced civilization like our own where they could go back and plant us somewhere. And there's not, earlier I was talking about how we need to have an evidence-based system, and in studying the history of human evolution and studying the rise of agriculture and the rise of civilizations, and I've taught intro to archaeology and world civilizations at different universities, we can see this very clear line of going from simple to complex, where we had stone tools 3.3 million years ago, and then we had fire 1.8 million years ago, and then we started to eat more and more meat 3.5 million years ago, and we can see that in our skeletal anatomy. We can see that in our brain size and the size of our guts. And then we can see where once we had agriculture about 11, 12,000 years ago, so many things about our anatomy changed. And then we started to get what you would expect to see if that was true. You start to get large megastructures, or what we call features in archaeology, where you have these massive buildings. And at that point, then it gets hard to try to explain something like that, because those things would have existed at some point in the past if we had that ability to travel across space or back through time, and then we don't see that. And it's not just people throw up air quotes and say, "Oh, it's mainstream archaeology." No, like we know, we have a very clear indication of what happened in our ancestral past and what happened with the rise of civilizations. This was a very recent thing in the context of human history. So to say that we're planted here implies something happened that we don't have any evidence for. And I know people want that. I know at that point it borders on a belief system where that's okay. If you want to believe that, that's fine. But the evidence doesn't necessarily support any of those ideologies.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I think about stupid things all the time. Well, they're not stupid, but I call them
they're
like
not stupid.
shower
No,
thoughts.
they're not stupid at all.
Where stuff you think about, like, hey, do we all see the same colors? I mean, if you look at it scientifically, we could all be seeing the same stuff, but we're not really seeing the same colors, and just stuff like that. And
yeah, absolutely.
When it comes,
none of it's stupid. It's different ways of thinking. It's different ideas. But again, we have to have an evidence-based system. We have to think about what we know, and if again, I hate to keep coming back to this, but if we want to believe something, that's fine. But we have to acknowledge that it's a belief and it's not rooted in actual evidence.
Yeah, and a lot of people get a bad rap for saying that too. I've heard so many people just go at like Neil deGrasse Tyson for saying stuff like that, because all those big conferences he does and all those talks that somebody always comes up to him and asks him about alien life. It just never fails. They ask him the big hard questions, right? And he's been asked a million times, and he's never said that it's impossible, it doesn't exist, and I don't believe it, right? What he said,
that's funny.
What he always says is, look, just like what you said earlier, we need to understand the difference between science. Let's think about the school subject, science, and belief systems, theories, and things like confirmation bias and all this other stuff. If I can't touch it, feel it, measure it, or get some type of evidence based on a hypothesis and go through that whole scientific formula to get what we call a good theory or even a fact sometimes, it's not really science.
Yeah.
And people still keep asking him every time. I guarantee you the next talk he does, someone will ask him those questions.
And what's really funny about you mentioning him specifically is I'm working with a couple of really unique and extremely smart individuals to produce a television series based around this book that I just wrote. And a couple of them, you can listen to their work now. They talked about my book in the most recent episode of the podcast, but one of them is Rhys Darby. He's been in Flight of the Conchords and Jumanji movie, and one of my favorites is Short Poppies, which a lot of your listeners might not be familiar with. But he started the podcast 10 years ago. Another one is Buttons, as they call him, but Leon Kirkbeck is his name. And they actually asked Neil deGrasse Tyson this very question about time travel, because my friend Leon, a producer at this TV company, had the same idea a very long time ago, and he's thought about it in very similar ways. And he's a very intelligent and clever man who's figured many of these things out too, and a lot of other people have as well. And it's awesome to come into contact with these people that have had the same ideas for so long and have thought about these things the same way. But he actually had a conversation with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it was the same thing. He was laughed off of the stage for even asking this, but this is a testable theory. This is something that someone like him should actually sit down and think about for a while, but it's so easy. And this comes back to what I was talking about earlier, how we can just dismiss people and ideas because it's been tainted by the stigma over time, when it should be something that we as scientists actually consider. And if we look at the mission of science, if we look at what science is and what scientists are supposed to be doing, we're not the problem. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye are the problem. They're the ones not doing their scientific duty to actually investigate things that are in the realm of science. And I feel that that's unfortunate. And all of the people that ignore what we're doing as intelligent, scientifically minded people, they need to be held responsible for that. They need to be called out for that because it's anti-science. But unfortunately, that's how it is in the scientific community too. And a lot of your listeners probably aren't aware of the ridiculous esoteric battles that happen between this camp in physics, or this camp in anthropology, or here and here in chemistry, or quantum mechanics, or whatever. But there are all of these feuding subfields within a field where we're just battling back and forth. And that's why this division between people in ufology that want a real explanation and people in ufology that want to just speculate about anything, that's why it doesn't bother me, because it's the same way in my field of anthropology, and especially paleoanthropology. It's a very contentious field. There's the old boys, as they call them, that have these ideas, and then people challenge that and they get mad. I've been dealing with this for decades. It's not a big deal.
You guys ever start drinking and getting fist fights?
Oh my God, you have no idea. Dude, there were times I almost beat the
it's all right.
Crap out of people at keg parties for their views on the out of Africa hypothesis versus the multi-regionalism. No, that's a real thing. Like, we get pissed about this shit. We really do. We get really angry about our viewpoints. And again, that's where confirmation bias comes, and we need to be open about everything. But I feel that there are certain scientists, and I would call out Neil deGrasse Tyson as one of those, who are just anti-everything that has anything to do with aliens. And that's stupid. That's not how this should work.
They just don't look into it at all.
They don't. And it's anti-science.
But my point is, too, though, and in his favor, is that he doesn't come out. I mean, they do kind of laugh and chuckle sometimes, but he doesn't come out and negate it entirely. He just explains the difference between science and belief. But I think what he needs to realize, and exactly to your point, is the reason why so many people keep asking him this question, especially at major speaking events and stuff, is because that's what we want from him. That's what they should be doing, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
We've got plenty of scientists looking into astronomy, and which I know you know quite a bit about that too, but looking into biology and molecules. We've got plenty of scientists doing that. If you're a big head or a big figure in this scientific community and you're popular, then I think it's your duty to go at the big questions, like go at it with whatever resources you got, because that's what the people want.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you just said. Absolutely. Here's another funny thing about that same individual who got laughed off the stage by Neil deGrasse Tyson. The big-haired dude from Ancient Aliens.
Giorgio Tsoukalos or whatever?
Yeah.
The one
same
he's
thing.
Got the hair that stands up?
The hair that stands up. If he had a bald head, you'd wonder if he'd be as popular as he is today. But he did the same thing. The same question asked by the same person to Neil deGrasse Tyson and this Giorgio fella met with the same response, even though it's one of few testable hypotheses that is and can be backed up by a lot of actual evidence from different fields, is interesting to me.
Well, I want to talk to you about that, actually. What do you consider? What actually can be tested, or first, what's considered evidence to you in this field, first and foremost?
I'm glad you asked that, and I actually wrote that down before we took the break, because you were talking about that before we even
Yeah, and I'm notorious for teasing things and then not doing it like I said I was going to. So
that's why I write things down, because I like to come back to things because I think they're important. And yeah, I think that's an extremely important question. What is evidence? I asked myself this every chapter of the book. What is evidence? And that's why those abduction reports and those sightings and reports to MUFON and Norfolk and those things are taken seriously, but also with a grain of salt. Like what is our evolutionary history? What do we know about the physics of time and time travel, the philosophy of time, the history of time? What do we know about different planets in our solar system and exoplanets and other solar systems? What do we know about the physics of traveling among them? What do we know about the ability to communicate? What have other PhDs written about communication, the evolution of life, astrobiology? To me, that's evidence. What happens to people when they interact with extraterrestrials, I think should be considered, but I don't consider that evidence. And that's a big difference between me and a lot of other people, is because we have a definition of evidence. And unfortunately, I repeat that word, unfortunately, that doesn't quite meet the criteria yet. I think it will eventually. I think there will be more open discourse about that. But the book mostly focuses on what we can know. I bring these things in. I think they're important to consider. And as you mentioned earlier, the book's different from a UFO book because it takes more of an outsider, what we call in anthropology, an edict approach to this phenomenon, where I think we should still talk about those things. I don't disregard them, but I also don't consider them as evidence per se. They're talked about, they're mentioned. I feel like there's a consistency across these reports that is almost undeniable and should be brought into the conversation.
Right.
But it's mostly a perspective in long-term evolutionary change, and what we can know and what we do know currently. And I feel like, in a lot of ways, I feel like I wrote this book for future humans with very limited knowledge from the past, almost in the same way that like someone would write this 200,000 years ago about now, just with limited information, but still trying to make a case about something that could potentially be true in the future.
Well, it's very analytical, if you ask me. I mean, some evidence isn't blatantly obvious. You have to put all the pieces together and then go back and check it again to make sure that it's evidence, right? I mean, because if you go back and you put a bunch of pieces together, well, that's a little bit different than saying, okay, when I freeze ice, it does this, right?
Right.
What you're doing is you're pulling in evidence from all kinds of different things, which some scientists might say, well, that's a coincidence or at best circumstantial. But if you look at each individual thing that you're pulling in, there's no doubt about what they're saying, right? So if there's no doubt about each compartment, when you put the compartments together, if I'm making any sense, then why should there be doubt there?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's the thing is if you can make a case around consistency, I think and that's very much what you're saying. If these compartments come together and they fit together, if you have a bunch of Legos and some of them have like tentacles and some of them have like clippy things and some of them are made out of dildos or something, like those aren't going to fit together. But if they're all the same sort of thing that fits together consistently, yeah, I think you should maybe consider those things. And that's how it is with abduction reports. That's how it is with all of these different descriptions of a spinning saucer-shaped craft. And
I was going to say, when dildos and Legos start fitting together, we should consider everything's on the table at that point. But encounters and contactees, like it's kind of like when they do, I brought this up last night with Mary Rodwell about Michael Newton, when he had so many clients that he would take into hypnotic trance, that they would bring back a lot of the same parallels, a lot of the same things. Now, after so many times, it can't be a coincidence. You got to look at some of that and start separating variables, right? I mean, and Nancy Trivolato talked to me about this too. She said, look, when you do a real scientific research, I don't even want to talk about it on the radio show because it's boring. If you know all the little details of the stuff that we have to look at, it would bore you to death, but we have to look at those things. Of course, your field of study, I think, is fascinating because it's a lot about the facial structure, what you were talking about. But I wonder, is there any other parts of other than the face on the human body that have been reported that make you think that we're related to what these beings are?
I mean,
bipedal is kind of obvious. If you look,
the bipedal thing, the bipedal thing's huge in my opinion. Just simply because the size of the exoplanets that have been discovered by the Kepler mission, only I think about 2.2, maybe 2.4% of them were actually the size of Earth or smaller, which is huge. Like, to be bipedal on a planet even slightly bigger than our own seems difficult. And to me, that's evidence. Like, that's a statistical fact based on astronomers' discoveries of neighboring planets and our own knowledge of how very rare bipedalism is on our own planet. Like, that is evidence. You can't really argue with the statistics involved in that. But beyond bipedalism, you can't even say beyond bipedalism, because our faces, our crania, as I discussed earlier, are the result of, or at least largely the result of, standing upright, becoming bipedal, and the head rotating down and the face getting smaller. And so one thing I would add to that, which I think answers your question and also ties it into something we talked about earlier, is it's not just that rotation of the head downward and the slinky, as we talked about earlier, but also what we started to do with our hands. We started to build fires, which allowed our food to get softer, especially meat. A lot of our food was meat starting around 3.5 million years ago. We started to cut it with stone tools. We started to get bone marrow out. We started to get softer food that could allow our faces to get smaller. Our teeth and our musculature around our jaws and our faces didn't have to be so big. So it's also culture. And what we talk about in anthropology is biocultural evolution. It's both biology and culture. And a good example of that is lactose tolerance. We're not supposed to be able to drink milk and eat cheese into adulthood. The only reason we can is because we evolved with drinking milk and drinking blood from cows, and especially East Africa. Yeah. If you look at the Maasai people, for instance, their main source of food is the blood and the milk of cows. The warriors mostly drink the blood, and the young people and the women drink a combination of milk and blood. And you parasitize the animal. It's a constant source of food. You're not just killing it and eating the meat, but you're getting all the nutrients from it and keeping it alive, which is huge. So early on, like thousands of years ago, we had that. And then with agriculture, once we started to say, hey, you come here and we'll tie you up or herd you around, but still milk you from time to time, they're like, sweet, you mean these wolves aren't going to eat me anymore? And you just take some milk? All right, I'm on board with that. I guess we have a relationship now. And that's domestication. We did the same thing with dogs 25,000 years ago. we let them have the scraps from animals we ate, and we developed a relationship. So those things continue to shape our faces. They continue to give us the reduction in our facial structure, our teeth and our jaws. But that was an example of how we evolved with our culture. That's biocultural evolution. We still continue to break down lactose with specifically the enzyme lactase. In order to do that, we produce lactase into adulthood where other mammals don't. If you go home and give your 10-year-old dog milk, it's going to be all farty and it's going to poop all over your house, because even though it grew up drinking milk, it's a mammal. It doesn't have that same characteristic that we evolved recently as a result of domesticating animals. So there's so many things like that are happening now and recently, like 10,000 years ago. That wasn't that long ago in the history of humanity. So projected into the future, if these same sorts of biocultural evolutionary trends continue, who knows? I mean, I'm not trying to speculate, and I'm very careful about horns, that.
Mike,
book.
You know that?
Oh, come on now, Jesus Christ!
No. Now tell me.
I saw that article.
I want to know what you think about that, because I've never talked to. All I know is the article. So this is my chance to get to talk to somebody who's actually studied it.
And I very much appreciate that about you, is that you do really want to know things and not just believe things. But no,
so just real quick before you answer, though, I want to make sure everybody's clear, because I think people are starting to get their eyes glazed over. I think we're getting already too scientific for them.
We are.
Somehow.
You're right.
I have no idea
Let's go back
how.
to dildos. Let's talk about dildos again.
We could talk about fairies, rainbows, and dildos, and we'll get their attention.
All right,
but no,
let's do it.
No, but seriously, the article that everybody's looking at is what I used to call text neck, right? Or where we were growing something in our head because we are looking down too much on our phones. The article came out and said that we're growing horns on the back of our head. Now, when I look at articles, I look at that as, okay, this is an article everybody's spreading. What's the real source of it? And they always say, well, a study from this university, blah, 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 and that's it. Okay, so you have studied this field. You know a lot about it. Are we growing horns in our head from looking down?
So what your listeners need to know is that there's a part of the skull on the back, and they can actually feel it. You can reach back there and feel it. It's a little bump. If you're a man, you can feel it more than if you're a woman. And I teach forensic anthropology, like what you see on the show Bones and other shows like at CSI Miami or whatever, where that part of the skull, it's known as the external occipital protuberance. That is one of the last things that holds our heads to our necks. I talked about how our faces grew smaller and our heads grew bigger. It used to be that our faces stuck out. So you can imagine like a counterweight where your face is sticking out, and then you need this big counterweight at the back of your skull to hold it. And that was a big part of the skull up until recent human history. Now it's this tiny little thing we call the external occipital protuberance. But you can still feel it, and that's how we tell the difference between men and women. Men have a bigger one, women have a smaller one. Right under your ears, you can feel what's called the mastoid process. That's also bigger in males than females. The ascending ramus of the mandible, so where your jaw goes up, it starts to curve up underneath. You can feel that too. And men, it's bigger than it is in women. So there is variation in that. There's also something that needs to be pointed out. Dildo. I think I'm losing people, so I'm just going to say dildo.
I'm listening
from
to
time
you.
to
You're
time.
all right. I got you.
I know, but your listeners might be checking out, so I'm just going to say dildo from time to time to draw them
just
back.
to get their attention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah, I got you.
All right. Sex toys and whatnot.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, like that part of the skull used to be big. It got smaller over time. There's also something called Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law is the reason why ninjas can punch stuff really hard and not break their hand. Is because your bone responds to stress. So if you punch something really, really hard over a long period of time, it's going to build up stronger bone, and then you can punch through brick and other ninjas' faces or your enemy or whatever. So there is the possibility that that part of the skull, the external occipital protuberance, is getting bigger slightly by looking down and looking at your phone more. But that is really stupid to make that correlation. Like, correlation does not equal causality. And that's a very important thing to understand in looking at anything, literally anything. People always try to manipulate you with that. Correlation does not equal causality. Just because there was a slightly bigger external occipital protuberance on a couple people who maybe looked at their phone more, what's the sample size? Why did they do this research? How did they select these people? Was that, did they happen to have like some sort of genetic precondition? There's a lot of things that need to be taken into account. That particular article, unfortunately, I saw spread across the internet. There may be something to be said there, but the photo that they showed seemed like clickbait. The horn that they showed, and I'm doing air quotes right now, seemed like clickbait to me.
But
and
they are saying it was researchers that, okay, so they said that the researchers at the University of, I think it was Sunshine Coast, Queensland, actually. It's funny, we were talking to somebody from Queensland last night in Australia, that they were talking about this, that the bone growth in younger adults, which they saw in x-rays, that reflects distorted posture. And I think it's just a hypothesis right now, but it's from the prolonged use of smartphones. So and they've had a couple of peer reviews. That's what the article says.
Yeah, no, I saw the article. I read the article. I was skeptical. I remain skeptical for the reasons I just described.
Sure.
And also that we are very prone to clickbait in this day and age, and people want to believe anything that has to do with us using our smartphones too much. And it does dictate a lot of things we do. But to have Wolff's Law, to have bone growth take effect because you're bent down all the time means you have to be really bent down. You're straining your neck. And that means that people aren't just raising their phone up a little bit when their neck feels strained. Like, why are they wrenching down so far that it initiates that bone growth on the external occipital protuberance? I don't understand how that would even work.
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, too, we totally skipped a break, so we're just going to go to the top of the hour until we do the news here, if that's okay with you.
I'm cool with it.
From an evolutionary standpoint, and we'll get back to the alien subject, I promise, but wouldn't that take quite a bit of time? I mean, what kind of timelines are we talking about here before skulls start to adapt?
No, that's a really good point, and that's another very important point. I'm so glad you brought this up. You told me when we started this interview that you weren't very smart or didn't think you were smart enough to like. I'm bastardizing what you said, but
yeah,
you were saying that you didn't think you had ideas that were.
I said I got intimidated by people with backgrounds like yours.
That's what it was. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because after reading your book, I was like, wow, man, this is extensive stuff, you know. But now that I'm talking to you,
you asked the best questions. Seriously, I'm coming up on like 30 interviews in the last 9 months, but no, you've asked the best questions today. This has been really fun.
Keep in mind, he's been on some big radio shows too, and I will be using that statement right there on my demo reel. Thank you very much. No, I'm just playing. Not really, but
no. Tell me what you just said. I got distracted by how good the question was.
Okay, so if we're growing bones at our head, like they're saying,
okay, no, I got it.
What about the timeline? How long would that take on an evolution process?
No, and that's an awesome question because what you just asked is the difference between evolution and acclimation. So imagine going up to high altitude. Okay, you're at say 2,000 feet elevation. You go up and live in the Himalayas for 3 months. You acclimate to that environment. You start to produce more red blood cells. Your lung capacity increases. Your heart starts pumping more blood to allow you to exist in that environment. But you don't actually pass any of those characteristics down to your offspring because they happen to you in your lifetime. That's an acclimation. So, and that's another thing that really pissed me off about this article, is it almost made it seem like we're evolving horns. If those things happen to those people who happen to wrench their necks down way too far because they couldn't just raise their hand up a couple inches, so it didn't make their external occipital protuberance and all of the bones and muscles around it to get stressed, then that's something that happens to them in their lifetime, in the same way that you going to high altitude makes you start to acclimate to those high altitude environments. None of those things you pass down to your offspring. None of them. The only things you pass down to your offspring are the ones that happen in your gametic cells, your genes that you pass down through sperm and egg. Okay. So anything that happens with your smartphone or going to high altitude or going and tanning for too long, if you tanned for a week straight and you just baked in the sun, your kid's not going to come out African American. They're still going to be the same white characteristics you had, and vice versa. Like, there are things that you do in your lifetime that only affect you and that don't get passed down. And the horn thing is one of those. And I really appreciate that question, because it draws attention to this very important line that's drawn between acclimation, making things happen in your lifetime, and adaptation, which is what they sort of implied in this clickbait article, that we're all evolving horns.
The humans were evolving horns, which would be a form of adaptation based on like evolution and time, which would take a long time, I think.
It would, and it would imply that we're only going to mate with people that have back of the head horns or something. There's going to be some sexual selection or some reason why that would exist, but that's not how it works.
I dig her horns. She's got
man, she's got some great back of the head horns. I'm gonna go make 100 babies with her.
That is okay. All right then. So taking that fact about time, if we look at our timeline and we say that the theory of humans evolving into alien species, or what we call aliens, could just be advanced species, how much time can we be talking about here? If you just had to estimate, I'm not talking about a scientific fact, but if you had to estimate how long it would take us to evolve into what a typical alien would look like that we know about, how long would that take?
Which one, though? Which typical
let's just say
alien?
The typical gray, like on the front cover of Communion.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that one specifically. But my point earlier about temporal ancestry, I think, is important too, that certain people that get abducted by things that they describe in a certain way could potentially be from very different points in time. So as long as I can preface it with that, I guess I'm willing to speculate about Whitley Strieber's alien on the cover of his book.
I mean, look, we've already got scientists that disagree on the timeline. You got Zahia Was that says that, humans are only go back to, was it 25? It's either 2500 BC or 25,000. I forget. I think it's 2500. And then you've got people like Robert Schoch that came out and said, look, there's water erosion on the Sphinx. Our timelines are way off. We're talking, he just put a guesstimate out there, 10,000, maybe 11,000 years off.
For future humans?
No. I'm just saying that it's okay to speculate, because others have that are so-called experts in their field. But what I'm asking you to speculate on is kind of way out there. I mean, there's no way of knowing.
No, there's not.
But it would take millions of years, at least, I would think. I mean, because if you're talking about just how long does it, I have no idea, but how long did it take us, they say, to go from apes, or what's ape-like, to where we are now? What's their theory?
Well, it's not their theory. It's
Darwin.
It's our theory. Yeah. This is what I do for a living. I study human evolution and the anatomy that takes place. And I'm sitting in my office right now, and I have this whole series of skulls that show that evolution. From the earliest stages of being bipedal, which I've described a couple of times tonight, that was 6, potentially 8 million years ago.
All right.
And those faces retracting and the brain growing larger, that's happened throughout. But it's been, and this is the problem, and this is why I'm being somewhat coy in the response, not just because I hate speculation, but also because it's an acceleration. If you look at that change, like most of our changes early on were in our postcranial anatomy, below our necks, becoming bipedal, walking upright. So actually getting those larger, more rounded brains and smaller faces was a pretty recent thing. So if we project that forward at the acceleration of that change, I would say your standard gray that you see on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book, or in like even Close Encounters, the Steven Spielberg movie, and everywhere. I mean, that quintessential archetypal alien is probably much, much less time than that. Probably within 20 to 70,000 years, I would say.
And you know what? I think the reason why people, they talk, you hear of these theories that negate Darwinism. They're like, well, we obviously, there was such a transition somewhere that we can't explain. You hear that a lot, right? There's the transition into what we are now, based on what they're showing us. That just doesn't make sense. But if you put acceleration into the factor, then it does kind of make sense, right? Like,
well, and it's been acceleration. Yeah. That's not it. That nobody in my field would ever disagree with that. And that's the thing, is that there's a disconnect between what we know as biological anthropologists who study this. This is what we do. There's a disconnect between our knowledge and people that want to just speculate about things or call us out for all of the reasons I mentioned earlier about this disconnect between science and ufology. But it doesn't need to be that way. It's the same thing with science and religion or creationism or whatever.
Right.
You can understand the history of the Bible and Genesis. Everything in Genesis very much follows, at least broadly, what we know about the Big Bang and the history of the universe and light and God understanding time differently than we do. Like, it doesn't have to be different. It doesn't have to be a disconnect. You can still understand the history of the Bible and the history of evolution in the context of what we know empirically, what we know scientifically. It's unfortunate to me that people frame those as dichotomous.
It's frustrating.
They can't be the same thing. Yeah, it pisses me off.
It's frustrating because I would get in arguments with my dad about that sometimes. He'd be like, well, it says here in the Bible that 1,000 years to God or 1,000 days to man is one, or 1,000 years to man is one day to God. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but you're looking at it literally. That could be just a nursery rhyme to explain to you that time is different for God and that we live a lot of years compared to his one day or wherever he is. You know, it could just be talking about relativity. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's unfortunate too that we can't talk about time. The Earth has to be 6,000 years old. No, I mean, if you look at it in the context of Genesis and Abraham and all of the other descendants that lived their lives in the generations, if you calculate it that way, yeah, I mean, based on your knowledge of time, it comes out that way. But that passage in the Bible specifically, where time is relative to God, where time is relative to the one that wrote the Bible, yeah, those things still match up. They still match up. They don't have to be different. You can still understand the way things played out, which are the same in both interpretations. One is an interpretation. One is more of a scientific understanding, but you can still understand how those match up and especially with that passage in the Bible. I've argued with my father about that too. It's funny. I don't think it needs to be an argument. It needs to be a point of agreement.
Exactly. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you would get into little squabs with people about science, like you guys all would go at certain things from different aspects. But that happens to me. Like, I have a friend named Rusty who used to come on the show, and after the show, we would go out in the yard and talk esoteric stuff. And, I would tell him what I thought the message of Jesus was, whoever he was. And also, I didn't really talk about it as fact all the time. And he would get so mad. He got honest with me once. He was like, dude, I feel like I want to punch you in the face. And I'm like, kidding. Why do you want to punch me in the face? He goes, I don't know, because I love you. But what you're talking about right now, for some reason, there's something inside of me that makes me want to punch you in the face. And it's because he has a traditional Christian background. He's always been brought up that way. And when you start talking about things that make sense and it entirely negates somebody's paradigm and way of life, it's funny to me that we get angry. Why do we get angry?
It's unfortunate. Confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's a trip, isn't it? And
it is.
You're not the first scientist to tell me that about the Bible. Actually, I had somebody on that talked about that specifically. That was his whole belief, that Genesis goes right along with the scientific timeline of the Big Bang, and was explaining that to us, So
no, I was raised in the church. I was raised Church of Christ, Methodist. I know all of the biblical stories. I read the Bible a lot. It's always sat next to my bed growing up. I don't feel that there has to be this division, and it's unfortunate. And again, it comes down to people that feel like there does have to be a division there. That's on them. That's on your friend Rusty at that point. That's not on you, brother. Like, you're able to see things and have an open mind and conceptualize realities and still have a faith. You don't have to feel bad about that. Rusty should feel bad about.
Oh, he did. He felt bad for feeling it, but he just acknowledged, that it was coming up in him, and
that's awesome. That's a sign of a good friend right there.
Yeah.
Somebody that can look at something critically and say, you know what, you're right. I was wrong. Maybe I should be more open-minded. That's awesome. Good for Rusty.
How hard is it? Okay, so now that I'm talking about that, how hard is it to do that in the scientific community? Is it just as hard as it is to do in the religious community?
I think so. That's a really good parallel. Yeah, no, that's it. Again, you ask great questions. No, I think it's very similar, but not many people are as willing to open their minds as Rusty, which is sad. I think eventually, I don't know. Well, I guess it comes down to disclosure. Like, once we have full-on governmental disclosure, they will say, oh, wait, there's something happening here. And we'll be like, yeah, we've been talking about this the whole time, but you guys had your thumbs up your butt, so you didn't want to talk about it. But no, I think I think it's exactly that. Yeah, it's some sort of bias based on an ideology. It's the exact same thing.
Confirmation bias is our enemy, isn't it?
It is, and it's not only confirmation bias, it's also an idea that something has stigma, so we can't talk about it. Like I said earlier, this theory has an actual falsifiable aspect to it. And that's what we base most things around in science. But still, it is ignored. It's still ignored by... It's actually interesting how it's ignored. I know we're running out of time, so we'll keep this short. But
yeah.
My colleagues who know me and know my research, and they can look up the papers I've written, even if they don't know me, and see that I do actual valid scientific research. They're true scientists. they're like, yeah, he's one of us, and he's looking at this critically, and he's written a book that really does a decent job at framing this phenomenon as something that is scientifically fastidious. But then there's the ones that were like early Rusty that are just like, no, mm-mm.
Right.
And I don't know. We'll see. I hope they evolve into later Rusty, because I think that's what science is. That's what we're supposed to do, is to look at things critically and to figure it out and to have a conversation and talk about it and call each other out on things that don't make sense. And that's what I've wanted to do this whole time. And it's been a big part of this project, I think.
Well, earlier you mentioned how long it took you to make the book or put it together, and you can definitely tell, because it's one for everybody that takes this subject seriously, that wants to get it more accredited, that wants to get it looked at more, should definitely grab this book. And not just grab the book just to say, I have the book, but it can be used for reference. And that was one of the first things that I've noted about this book. I was like, wow, okay, if I read this book a couple of times, and I'll be able to use it for reference and arguments, or when I'm talking to people about aliens and this subject and how it's not looked at scientifically. I think you did a really good job with it, man. It's a really good book.
I appreciate that. Like you're right. I mean, one thing I was trying to do is pull things together in a way that we could just have a conversation. Like if you get something from this, that you can have a conversation with somebody later. Or I can. Like, I've been doing this too. It's not just about putting something out and then sitting back and saying, yeah, you guys talk about it. Like, since I published this 3 months ago, I have had so many people contact me who know things that I didn't when I published this book. That's why I call it an evolving theory, or an evolving model. It's an evolving project, because I'm constantly changing how I think about it. And that's all I wanted to do, is just put something out there that, yeah, if people read it, they can find things to add, little pieces of the puzzle that they can add. So I really appreciate that, actually.
And obviously, everyone always asks, hey, Doc, are you going to write another book? I wonder, after this book was, after what you had to do to put this book together, I mean, what are you doing now? You just blogging and going around and talking about it for a while, huh? That's what I do.
Man.
I wouldn't write another book. I mean, if I put 7 years into something, 5 years, 4, it would be hard for me to write another book. I think it's harder on guys like you, because we put so much pressure on y'all, the scientific community. We do. And we put a lot of pressure on you guys, because you have to, you can't just state your opinion without somebody coming at you,
Yeah. No, and I feel like that's also a problem in the ufology community, is that you write something, you get invited to give talks, and then it's like, oh wait, I want to go give more talks, so I'm just going to make shit up now. And then
right.
The next thing you know, you're just like making shit up and to make money. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about what's in the book. I do have sort of a verbal agreement with a really amazing person, a professor in the Northeast, a philosopher actually, and we're gonna maybe write something about consciousness. We both have a strong love of that subject, but no, otherwise I'm hoping to just continue talking about this and not trying to just make shit up to make money.
I gotcha. And I'm glad that you said that, because there are people doing that.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, once they get a big name, they get these checks and stuff. They want to keep that lifestyle up, right? So they're like,
yeah,
well,
I got a job. I want to do my job and hang out with my family and talk about like aliens in a real context. I'm not trying to just make stuff up to keep it going. I actually hate traveling. It pisses me off that I have to like leave my family from time to time.
Well, listen, thanks for coming on the broadcast. Thanks for hanging out with us late at night. And you seem like a guy that we could just talk to about any of the subjects we talk about on this show. So maybe in the future, man, we'd love to have you back. We don't have to talk about aliens. If you like talking about consciousness, we can go down that road too. You know, we could talk about anything.
No, I'd love to. That'd be great. Let's do it.
You guys go check out the website. It's idflyobj. That's idflyobj.com. You can follow them on Twitter at MorphoTime on Twitter. Facebook.com is the same as the website, idflyobj. That is Dr. Michael P. Masters. We'll be right back for the surprise I was going to tell you about. And thank you again, Dr. Masters. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. It's great talking to you too.
Right, me old Chiners. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Lighting the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of the fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
Parabnormal News, I'm Brad Bernards. Two similar photographs of flying saucer-style UFOs, allegedly taken recently over the city of San Agustin, Oaxaca, Mexico, have many UFO watchers interested because of its better than the average UFO photo clarity. It also has many who know their UFO history interested because San Agustin is also the name of the city in New Mexico where an alleged UFO crash occurred in July 1947, an event sometimes referred to as the Other Roswell incident because of its proximity in both time and location to the more famous one. The other, in San Agustin, New Mexico, is equally mysterious because of rumors of a live alien as well as alien bodies, crashed discs, and military threats to locals unless they kept quiet. The images of what looked like a flying saucer spread quickly on Twitter and on some Mexican media sites. While the clarity is obvious, the details are not. There's no information on the exact dates, who took the photos, time of day, description of movement, any other witnesses, etc. This pushes the needle on the skeptical meter to just a hair away from hoax. Using a new technique, scientists have performed the world's smallest magnetic resonance imaging to capture the magnetic fields of single atoms. It's an incredible breakthrough that could improve quantum research as well as our understanding of the universe on subatomic scales.
Electron spin resonance, which is similar to an MRI machine in a hospital, and this allows us to sense, to detect indirectly nuclear spins.
Lead author Dr. Philip Wilkie of the Center for Quantum Nanoscience. To bring the process down to much finer scales, the researchers used a scanning tunneling microscope. All they needed to do then was add pulses of radio frequency current, which allowed the sensors to detect the energy released by the electrons, producing an image of the magnetic field of a single titanium or iron atom. Find all of tonight's stories at parabnormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
So go grab that book. I'm telling you, I've got the book. I've listened to the first 4 chapters, and you can tell that Michael P. Masters put a ton of work into that book. And I think that it's actually very plausible that aliens, that what we call aliens, could be future versions of us based on evolutionary concepts. And he cites a lot of stuff in that book, and I'm glad it's out there. It will be a good book for reference. So I want to thank him for coming on. Anytime some of these guys that are working and they do a lot of research, they take this stuff seriously. So, and they also take their time very seriously. I think all of us should take our time seriously, but specifically when it comes to that. So I know some of you might be upset that I didn't get to your questions to speculate about time and other things, but I wanted to focus on some of the subjects him and I agreed to talk about tonight. Speaking of time and how we have to respect it, Brother Dan Lopez is with us. How long has it been since the Reverend Dan Lopez has been on Lighting the Void? It has been such a long time. And for the fact that I can just hear you talk on the radio program again makes me so happy, man. And I know others like Justin and a few other people that have hit me up asking about you are going to be happy just as soon as they hear you say hello. So what's up, brother?
What's up, Joe?
Man, it really is good to talk to you again. And to be in all honest and being just honest with you guys, I talked to Dan the other night. We had a normal conversation where I would talk to him so much that there was nothing left to talk about. Sometimes we'd get an awkward silence. And I was like, oh, it's just like the old times, just like what we used to do. And it's cool to have you. Really, it is, though, man. I mean, you bring a lot to the show, and I consider you one of the first featured co-hosts on this show. That's why when I put that page up on the website, as far as frequent co-hosts, I put you up at the top because you've been here since the start of this thing, pretty much. And we're all glad to see that you're better, brother.
It's nice to be better. I'll tell you that much. I'll say hello to everybody who's out there. Hello, everybody who's out there.
Yeah, tonight we were talking about some pretty heady stuff as far as science goes. And I know you and I like to talk esoteric and spirituality and things like that. But what do you think about that, man? Do you think that that's possible? Right? I've never really thought about us being, when it comes to evolution and Darwinism, that we would even evolve into something more than we are now. Haven't really thought about it, but we should think about that. If evolution is a real thing, if Darwinism is a real thing, then what are we becoming?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a real good question. I kind of appreciated everything the guy was saying, but I didn't really put that thought out there until like Daryl Anka, the guy who channels that freaking, forgot what his name was, but yeah, who knows? I mean, if for that, especially that acceleration point, if the species actually accelerates, what is it going to be? And I was thinking about that chicken or the egg thing, which came first. And you got to remember that as soon as the dinosaurs decided to drop off their feathers or start growing feathers, either way, the egg was there and then it just came out. It reminded me of the Edgar Cayce stuff where the Temple Beautiful was erected so that people with throwbacks, people would grow with wings, were born with wings, or they were born with hooves and stuff like that. They would go to the temple so that people could pray over them and do surgeries and stuff like that to restore them back to their more human-like self. And they would come out, born from normal human beings, but they would have these things on them. And you could see this happening today, still to this day. People grow scales and stuff like that. And, they have tails. And, they have to be surgically removed or whatever. And some people grow with them depending on what country they're in. They wind up living with it for the rest of their lives. They wind up being, the circus act of the town. So the opposite is, just as interesting. And I thought the conversation that you guys had with the horns.
Well, you remember that article going up. I mean, it was all over every conspiracy show, right? We're growing horns from looking at our phone. And I was like, wow, that is some scary stuff. Are we really doing that? But
it came up again recently on the interwebs about the horns and everything like that. And I was like, this is kind of bizarre. That would kind of like mean that somebody wound up going to bed with a goat or something like that, and freaking the next thing you know it, the whole civilization started doing the same thing. In order for that kind of speculation to be something that would actually happen, bestiality just goes rampant. It's not completely unheard of, but it's crazy.
I think people don't like to think about it, right? Because it makes them feel human, True. We always want to think that we're these grand spirits of consciousness that nothing can ever happen to. And when we look at those types of things like weird evolutions or mutilations or things that happen to our bodies, it makes us feel too human. And we don't want to acknowledge that. And burying our head in the sand is something that really gets on my damn nerves sometimes in this community. I'll just be honest with you. It does. We bury our heads in the sand and we don't want to talk about anybody's suffering or anybody's problems or what they're going through or because it's negative. And to me, what you're doing is you're doing humanity a disservice when you don't acknowledge the suffering of other people, when you don't want to talk about it,
True. Yeah, true. It was quite interesting that you guys brought up the subject of open-mindedness. And with that becomes, the ability to remain open to learning, and it's as long as I remain open to learning, I'm willing to put aside my beliefs on top of my, the understanding that I have to hear something new. And then I can, decide whether that actually makes sense to me or it doesn't make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, well, that's even better. Because that's what I said before, a long time ago is that, I don't mind if we don't get along. Sometimes I prefer it because it gives me something to do. When you start challenging each other's, thoughts and beliefs and stuff like that, you actually open yourself up to a way that you might not have thought of before. And this changes your outlook and it changes your paradigm, sure. And, but it does allow you to be a little bit more accepting of other people's beliefs and other people's, understanding as well, which, just broadens your horizon, it's, makes you more worldly, I think.
Looks like some, Dave in the chat says that BTO passed away. Who's BTO? Do you remember BTO?
Don't know.
BTO.
Oh, wait.
BTO passed away for liver disease that apparently was hereditary in his family. I'm trying not to be insensitive here.
I know Rip Torn just passed away. I don't know if he's referring to him.
Okay, so it might have been a long time since I've talked to. Oh, I know who he's talking about. I think I talked to that guy one time, but he was about consciousness. Beyond the Omniverse is what he went by. He talked about consciousness and stuff quite a bit, actually. So apparently he passed away, and Dave wanted to take the opportunity to tell us in the chat. I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, it's a perfect opportunity. But he, if I remember correctly, that guy, he really believed in stuff, and he stood up for what he believed in. He wasn't afraid to, and I think I disagreed with him on a couple of things, but he wasn't afraid to stand up for what he thought and what he believed in. He wasn't afraid to be vocal about it. And I think that's fantastic, and I hate to hear that he passed away. So
Agreed.
Rest in peace, brother.
I remember him well. We did go back and forth on a couple of things. Yeah. And he was very, adamant about what he believed in. God bless him.
And Craig saying in the chat, hopefully he passed the system by and isn't another Omniverse. That would be cool, right?
Yep.
I wonder about that sometimes, man. Like when we pass away, if we get in that state where we're like, that, what? I was afraid of that, You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I know, but I know we've all heard, if anybody's been listening to this show for a while, we've all heard your stories about that place. And every time I watch Stranger Things and I see Elle get into that dark place, it always reminds me of your story, man. Always.
The void.
Yeah, the void, the black void that she goes into when she's doing her thing or tapping into her power and her consciousness powers or trying to spy on people. That's such a black void that she's in. Every time I think about your story and when it comes up,
I kind of think whenever I think about it, I kind of wish that I was there just a little bit longer just to see what else would happen. Unfortunately, I was pulled back.
Yeah, not unfortunate for us. Let's all keep in mind too that the doctors have told you that you were going to be a goner a long time ago. Brother, you got some heavy static. I'm going to let you fix that. I think it's that connection or that cord again. But the doctors told you a long time ago that you were going to be a goner in 6 months or something, and you've been here for years. I mean, so that I can't explain that. Have they tried to explain that? Have you even approached them or asked them, wait, didn't you say that, I wasn't going to live very long and now I'm here? Do they consider you an anomaly right now?
The way they looked at me, they sure looked like they considered me an anomaly because they would just stop in front of the door and just look at me, smile, and shake their head. So, yeah.
Well,
it would feel like you would feel like an anomaly when your doctor looks at you like you shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I've had that. I've never felt that till that last time I told you I went to the doctor and he gave me that look. I said I'm having this issue, and you and I have talked about it, and he gives me that look like pulls the stethoscope out, starts checking your heartbeat. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? That's when it's time to grow up. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You need to pay attention to what's going on because people like Eric Markham, and both Eric and Dan, have talked to me about some of the things that I've done in my health because I just thought I was a little kid, that I could just keep doing things the way I did and nothing bad would ever happen to my health. And that ain't the way it works. Obviously, when you reach a certain age, the body just doesn't like stuff anymore, and it's going to do what it's got to do. But seeing those pictures of you laying in that hospital bed, I got to admit, brother, a lot of us were worried about you, man. I mean, it was awful to see that. And all I wanted to do was talk to you. But I know you didn't want to talk about it. And I'm talking about before you had the surgery, because you went to the hospital a couple of times, didn't you? Before then?
Yeah, I went a couple of times, and then between those, I was going in and telling them there's something not right. I was listening to my body, but my breathing, I just couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't hold the guitar. I couldn't do anything. I went down to musical run, and I took my daughter with me and just went to go check out some pieces down there, and I grabbed the guitar, pulled it off the wall, and my daughter was with me, and I just sat down for 2 seconds, plugged the damn thing into an amp, got about 3 chords in, and I'm like, I can't.
Really?
I just can't. Yeah, I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. In fact, we had to walk out of there because I had to get back home, because it was just. I wasn't sure if I was going to have another episode or whatever the hell it was. But it wasn't good, man. I was incontinent, the whole 9 yards. I mean, thing was so bad. I was, middle of the night praying, one or the other, take me or get this out of me or something, But this can't continue, because I'm tired of having my last breath, only for it to continue. Yeah, it was rough, man. It was a constant battle, man.
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of people like to hear you talk about is, and Dan and I had talked about this, you don't have to talk about all the things. Like, you guys, if you want to hear Dan's spiritual warrior story, it's all archived in podcast form from the beginning all the way to the last episodes of Spiritual Warrior Today. And I don't like pressing Dan to do more stuff with the conditions that he's in, but I know all of you want to hear more from him. But to recall all of the details about all that stuff is practically impossible for most of us. But I think, just to be honest with you, brother, I like just talking to you. I like picking your mind about what you think about stuff now. And I appreciate it. I don't have a super educative background or a super spiritual background, or I'm not an authority in anything. When I get on this show, I talk about what's on my mind. That's it. And I think that's what a lot of people like about what you do. But I would say, if you guys want to hear some interesting stuff or learn some very interesting things, to check out the Spiritual Warrior Today. There's a YouTube series as well, because you've heard me bring up the door knocks, right? About how I kept hearing the knocks. It was Dan's story that made me pay attention to that, and that's still been quite a mystery to me. But that's sad. But that's life, though, right? I mean, if you think about it, it's sad to hear about BTO passing, Beyond the Omniverse passing. But on the other side of life, we've got your case to where a lot of people wouldn't be here, but you're still here. It makes me think that you got a message to deliver, man. Like, you're not. You ever think about that though? Like, why am I would. Like, why? I'm happy I'm here, but why? Absolutely happy.
I don't know. I was talking to my daughter about this the other night, and I was telling her that when I was getting my stuff together and I had stopped doing drugs and everything like that, I was going to meetings and whatever, and saying how they had changed, because 1986 for me was like a very magical time, right? So 86? It seemed like back in 1986 I got clean, and so ran into a bunch of meetings, and I didn't just go to one fellowship. I went to like freaking 5 different fellowships, because I was messed up in the head, but good. So I went to everything. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it was a magical time, man, because the trust level in the meetings was intense. When you think about people saying, "Oh, don't judge me," this and that, those meetings were like the only places that you could actually sit down and not really worry about being judged, especially if you're bearing your soul. Because this is what
are you talking about? Like AA meetings or NA meetings?
Yeah, like anonymous meetings. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But I went to like Adult Children of Alcoholics and Cocaine Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous and all kinds of shit. And so I even went to Overeaters Anonymous because I wouldn't eat when I was stressed out, and so I figured, well, I can relate. I was like, yeah, I hear you. I got a problem. And but I said to myself, I go back and I go check it out, and I sit down in the meetings. This is like a couple of, like 5 years ago or so. And it's not the same. The atmosphere is not the same, and you could tell there's just this overlying tension that's sitting in there.
Well, what do you mean?
There's an overlying tension that's in the meetings that wasn't there before. Just like when you went into the meetings, you felt like you were home. Like when you go into the meetings now, you don't feel like you're home. There's really no other way to describe it.
What do you think changed, bro?
I think it got overtaken. I think it got
infiltrated.
Yeah, I honestly do.
Kind of like Freemasonry did.
Do. Well, you know why I think this way is because they had something that actually worked. People were actually getting better. People were becoming more self-aware. They were looking into themselves, and they had a place that they felt comfortable that they could do so. And so that became a threat because it was threatening to those who were on the other side. I won't name names, but they were finding out that this was actually becoming a movement. And it really was. I mean, it was
People
prolific.
Getting clean. There was a big movement.
You couldn't turn a corner without somebody being able to say, oh, I heard you know Bill and stuff like that. Bill W. was one of the people who wrote the things. Who took the word from the Oxford. Somebody correct me out there.
I don't know. I can barely hear you. You sound kind of far away, to be honest with you.
How about now?
You sound much better.
Okay. So, but there was an Oxford something or other, and it was a very Christian-based thing, but it was rewritten by Bill W. and used as the basis for the anonymous meetings, right? And so these traits were actually allowing people to have faith. It was allowing people to find their own God, allowing people to become more self-aware about themselves. And it was going around. It was going around to where people were actually healing. This vicious cycle of dysfunctionality within the homes was actually occurring. And so that became a threat because who wants America to be united? They're trying to get out there and destroy everything from the inside out, right? So the threat was the core, the family, okay? If they could break up the family, they won. Divide and conquer is everything. If they keep everybody in fear, they won. And what was happening was nobody was becoming fearful anymore. Especially those who were becoming more and more spiritual, more and more self-aware. This became the focus and not the programming that was being fed by those who were feeding it. And so that couldn't be. And so while I was on my own freaking, tirade, living life and because I had already put my time in, it just got completely usurped. And it is no longer what it used to be. Now, the drugs that are out there, it's scary. Like the drugs that were out there when I was getting clean, forget about it. You could, I mean, people were overdosing and, dying and stuff like that. That's no joke. But, today, you don't know. You don't have a clue. I mean, you could take one pill. It could be the first time, and that'll be the last time you ever take a breath.
Well, listen, I want to tell everybody, too, for reference, if they don't know what because we've got some new listeners that are here with us. I know for a fact that started listening to the show before, you went off the air. Dan is notorious for the spiritual warrior mentality that we've brought to the show through him, because Dan had one of those rough and rowdy pasts that a lot of us know about, and it ended up, cause and effect happened, and he went through a serious spiritual battle with this stuff. And like I said, all that's in Spiritual Warrior Today. So that's what he's referring to when he's talking about these types of things. Because I know that you're speaking like you're assuming it's still just the same old listeners, but it's not. There's a lot of new people hearing you for the first time too, and I got to tell you.
Well, I've been away for a while.
Yeah, you have. But I've got to tell you, man, you have inspired a lot of people, and you're absolutely right about, the dangers of stuff that's on the street. I tell Corbin that all the time. I've got people that report to me about it. When even just marijuana, like they're putting fentanyl and mixing that with God knows what, it's killing people. Like you don't know what the hell is out there anymore. And it's 100% true. I got to make up for this break time, guys. We'll be right back with the Reverend Dan Lopez. Don't forget as well, look, we've got a chat room over on the Fringe FM, and that's our main hangout. That thing stays open 24/7. So if you're a lover of freedom of speech and you like to be able to post whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you're nice and respectable, you can come hang out with us anytime in there. It's the Fringe FM chat. Just click on where it says chat at thefringe.fm and you'll get an instant invite. We'll be right back.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling. The ground shook. You could hear rushing water. And then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails. Stores with their shelves stripped bare. ATMs can't operate. Deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand 3 truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in 1 business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheTea.com.
You are listening to the Fringe FM, and I'm Michael Deacon reminding you can find my show right here on the Fringe FM every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or by going to michaeldeacon.com. The choice is yours.
Welcome back. We are in the last inning of Lighting the Void tonight. Tomorrow night, I'm excited. The first 2 hours of Lighting the Void, we're going to have our friends from Grimerica, the podcast, come on, and also Grimerica.fm. Don't forget that they have a radio station too, Grimerica.fm, where they play their shows, past shows, Cruising with Steak, Our Big Dumb Mouth podcast. You know, I consider all of those guys, Cruising with Steak, OBDM, Grimerica, all of those guys. They're really good friends of mine. I don't get to hang out with them as much as I used to. I mean, some nights I used to hang out with them and play Dungeons and Dragons, but here lately I don't get to hang out with them as much as I used to get to. So they're coming on the show tomorrow night, and it's going to be really cool. There's no telling what we're going to talk about, but I know they've got a ton of fans, and I can't wait to get to speak with them again, man, because they're really good folks. And then we've got Art Funkhauser coming on, and that's Thursday night, and we're gonna talk about the deja vu experience. We're not just gonna sit and talk about it and tell our stories. I mean, they've done some real studies into this stuff, so this is really, it's been a really cool week, man. And I say this so much, and I know you're getting sick of it as a listener, but I got to say it. To Patrick, to the guy that stepped up and volunteered to help me book guests and do this stuff, he's absolutely exactly what the show has been looking for. And I can't thank you enough, brother. I really cannot. I mean, the guy knows me so well, Dan. It would almost be like if you booked all my guests, you know?
Right.
Think about that. Like he thinks about the subject matter and goes to find somebody for that subject matter. And we're booked out for a month, a little bit further than that, actually. All
That's
because
excellent.
of him. Yeah. And
yeah, he's a good egg. I got to chat in instant messaging through Instagram with him. Very nice guy. Very, very polite.
And again, I want to acknowledge that, you know, I want to fully acknowledge Beyond the Omniverse and just rest in peace, brother. And thank you for all you did for this community. I know he got into podcasting a little bit too. And I got to respect anybody. If you're listening to this, anybody that will stand up to anybody and say what they think. I don't care if you're wrong. If you really believe it and you really feel that it's true and you're willing to stand up and get loud about it a little bit, we all need that. We need that more in this community. And I think I can't tell you how many times I got emails about the Fringe FM. Well, you got this one person talking about ascension, and then you got Ryan Gable saying that these folks are frauds. I don't get it. And I'm like, you don't get it. I hope you get it by now, and we need everybody. We need everybody's points of view to get to the bottom of what we call the fringe, which I believe is where some of the bigger truths are about life. Instead of separating and going our own separate ways, never talking to each other, we need all hands on deck. We need to have debates.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Contrarian views are interesting because they always challenge you. You know, it was an interesting thing, you know, when you have a conversations and you're going through spirituality or whatever, and you're doing your searches and you're seeking, and you run into somebody like an atheist, and then you have this conversation with them, and they have damn near more knowledge about all this stuff, theology and everything like that than you do, and you're like, but I thought you don't believe, and they're like, it don't mean I'm not looking.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, you know, you got to stay open, man. Stay open. So, yeah, there's somebody out there for everybody, you know, if you think about it. And that's the beauty of this platform that we have at the moment. You know, it's like somebody was saying it's like the golden age or the Wild West. And it really is, because we still have the opportunity to be able to tune in to something that we can relate to. You know, if you're thinking about this other place, imagine if you were in like China, where you're only stuck in one box, you know, and it's only their view and their view only. So what choice do you have but to go underground?
Right. And, you know, I was telling Michael during the break, Dr. Michael P. Masters, I was telling him, and he's a good old boy. You know, you could tell he's got some good old boy in him, right? But he's really smart. Like if you listen to his book, he's super smart. So you can tell that he's trying to not glaze people's eyes over when he talks about what he's talking about. But I told him during the break, I said, I think everybody should do a podcast. And I think some people that don't want to, they'll blog. And I think everybody should do that too. And speaking of which, there's a couple of articles you guys need to check out at the Fringe FM. Some people from the chat wrote these articles, and they're fantastic. Dre G of Eyes Open, we just put one out on the Fringe FM, the news blog there, and it's all about cutting the cords of your past. And she talks about how to get rid of it. And she doesn't just speculate and talk about the philosophy of it. She actually gives you a formula, what some people would consider magic, but a formula that she uses that works to get rid of these things, these attachments, or what we call attachments or elementals or whatever you want to call them. And then Amanda wrote an article about facing your shadow, doing shadow work. And it's just picking the minds of the listeners. It's almost like I feel like I should have a night to where they get to do the show, but they definitely feel like my crowd, right? They feel like your crowd. And I know we all relate to them. And I think every one of you guys, if you ever thought about doing a podcast, even if you pick up your phone, if you have a thought, and this is what I was talking to Michael about, like we have so many genius thoughts, ideas, or just thoughts that convey a message or argue certain facts. And we think about it on a daily basis, but we forget. And we forget we even had that brilliant idea or had that thought. I think everybody should pick up their phone, talk into it. You don't have to have a fancy radio show with breaks and segues or anything like that. Say what you feel and then broadcast it, put it out there, and don't quit. I think a lot of people quit, and I don't think they should, because it took a long time and we still have a relatively small audience here. I'm just saying. And it took a very long time to find each and every one of you. It really did. But it's so worth it, because I can't tell you how stoked I am to be able to talk to you guys. I mean, if I didn't have you guys, then I would be stuck trying to talk to Dan every night, and he hates it.
That's not true.
But you know what I'm talking about, right?
That's not true. As long as I was there.
You know what I'm talking about, though. You should, a lot of you are brilliant, and you just don't even know it. Somebody somewhere told you that you weren't, or put that thought in your head that you weren't smart enough, you weren't good enough, or that your ideas weren't great enough. or you think you don't have the background. That's the stuff that gets me, because I'm in a field where I feel like I got to have some type of authority, or I went to broadcasting school or whatever. And, you know, I've been told time and time again that by these guests, at the very least, that they love talking to me, or that I'm intuitive and I ask great questions. And, you know, I'm like, yeah, whatever, you're blowing smoke. But after a while, you start realizing maybe all that stuff that was programmed into your head, that you weren't anything, or that you weren't good enough in whatever way, isn't correct. It's just not correct. Period. You are fantastic, most of you. Pretty much most of you that I know.
That's the dysfunctionality coming out, you know, people thinking that there needs to be an authority, and so they won't go here or there, or here, there, and yarn looking for information, because they feel like that it needs to be, you know, there needs to be those Ph.D. letters and all kinds of stuff behind them, when mostly it's just life experience. And I've always been about the experience. If you have the experience, then you have something you can talk about, because nobody can take that away from you. You had it, you know? So yeah, and there's always somebody out there who can relate to it. May not be a lot, like you said, there may not be a lot, you know, but there's somebody out there. And if you can reach that, just one person, that one person doesn't feel alone anymore, forget about it.
Right. Exactly. We're in the age of the campfire, the storyteller. It's like going to a place, and I don't know if I wrote about this, or I think I wrote about this somewhere. Maybe it was in a dream, but no. I told one of my podcast hosts this. Imagine that you go to a place where there's a ton of campfires with people sitting around it, and you can go from one campfire to the next, and you can sit there and listen to what they have to say and what they're talking about. And if it doesn't resonate with you, you can go to another one, until you find the place or the campfire that you really feel like you belong to. And that's what we're in now. That's what's happening right now. But I feel like, I've had at least 10 people that I know of that sent me messages. Hey, Joe, I'm doing a podcast and come check us out. And when can you be my guest? And they don't realize, like, I'm in too deep now. Like, I'm way in too deep with the host and all these other shows. I hardly have time to do any of that stuff. And they do 5 or 6 shows and they quit. And I'm like, why did you quit? You know, don't quit. You don't have to be the next Casey Kasem or whatever. You will find your group. You know, you will. And along the way, if you really enjoy the craft of audio and storytelling, or even YouTube and whatever you do, when you start figuring out that you enjoy it, then you'll start doing what I'm doing. You know, you'll start trying to make it better. I mean, this show's been under development since the beginning. It's not a finished project. It's not even where I want it to be, but I can't wait around till I'm ready. I'm one of those, I guess it's the Aries in me, Dan. I'm one of those ready, fire, aim type of guys. You know what I mean?
So am I. April 13th. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's just do it. We'll figure it out as we go.
Exactly. And then you get the people saying, how did you do that? How did you even figure that out? I was like, it was put to me to be done. So I did it.
Right. Yeah.
You don't question it. You know, there's like that thing, you know, there's never a perfect time. It's like having a kid. You know, there's never a perfect time. Just do it. You know, it just happens, and you just go with it. And then you find out what you're made of.
Dan, if there was one, like, a piece of advice that you could give people, like, looking back on your past, and I'm being serious. It's not a joke. I'm being serious. If there's one piece of advice you could tell everybody, what would it be? Would it relate to, you know, time is short, stuff like that? Because that's what everybody keeps telling me. You know, you're happy. You don't think nothing's going to happen till it's gone. Then you're going to be upset. I'm like, well, I've heard this a lot.
No. If there was anything that I had to say, it was like, of everything that I've learned, the one that I've come to appreciate is getting to know myself. Getting to know what I'm made of, getting to know what makes me tick, getting to know where my limits are, getting to know how I work, all the faults, all the hardships, all the good parts as well, and just being aware of that. Knowing that allows me to do a lot more and to be spared a lot of the BS and to know where I stand without everything or anything on the outside making a difference. Know yourself. Get to understand yourself. Question yourself. Write it down and do whatever you can to answer the questions that you have from yourself. Your questions in your life are the most important things that you have, because you are the only one who's going to be there when you have to sit down and get hit with whatever you get hit with.
Yeah, you're going to be all by yourself.
9 times out of 10, you're going to be there, and you're going to be the only one there for yourself. We may be blessed with family and friends and sure, all this and that and the other thing, but nobody else is going through the same thing that you're going to be going through. You're the one that's going to have to ultimately answer for yourself. So knowing yourself is going to take care of a lot more than if you're just sitting there going, why?
Yeah, and others, even your direct family members, the people that you think care about you the most, your children and all that stuff, there's going to be times they can't even be there for you. I mean, like right now, my son knows I'm doing a show, right? He knows that. He knows I'm talking to you too, actually. But 9 minutes before we go off the air, he's texting me about can he get $10 to pay for a Fortnite battle pass when he should be sleeping. You see what I mean? And that's one of the things that I learned when I had panic attacks all the time. Because when you have panic attacks, you really think you're going to die. And people say, well, nothing good comes from anxiety. That's caused from depression, and you got to get rid of it. I say BS, man. I learned something from it. Totally learned something from it. That all of the people that I thought truly cared about me could do nothing. You know, that I was by myself. That the more I reached out for help because I was so desperate and scared, the further away they felt. I'm talking about my parents, everybody I thought loved me, that would hold me while I'm dying and say, please don't go, Joseph. No. This was a lonely place to be and a very scary place. And it took me a long time to battle that, to realize that. So I think anybody that's going through severe anxiety and panic disorder and you think that it's a disease and a curse, I'm telling you right now, it's one of the biggest character tests that you'll ever go through. And, I know it doesn't sound as bad as maybe like open heart surgery, but it feels that way.
No, don't even go there, because I know I can agree with you 100%, because I was going through the same thing with the anxiety and the panic attacks and stuff like that throughout the whole thing, and you're sitting there or you're down on your knees and you're trying to beg for breath, and it ain't coming. It ain't coming. And it gets to the point where it feels like you're choking. And, if anybody knows about being choked to death, you lose control of all your functions, and having that happen to you all the time is not, it's no joke. And it's so funny that you were saying that, because, that was one of the things that I had to stare down in the face. I had my 2 daughters and my sister, and they were saying, can't do this. You got to hang out. You got to stick around, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, when I got clean, it was like I had to do it for myself. And this time around, I feel like I did it for them. But with that in mind, I had to say to myself that I am completely responsible for doing this for them. It wasn't just, I could turn around and say, I did this for you, it ain't like that. It's not like that at all. It's more like I did this out of the love for them.
It's something I bring up on
if it was up to me, I'd have been done. That'd have been it. I'd been pushing up. I should be pushing up daisies by rights.
Yeah, but you ain't. That's the thing about it.
I ain't.
I'm
not a haint.
Daisies, right?
I ain't a haint.
Yeah, well, don't ever turn into one. You know, but people are selfish, man. You know, like they want you here, dude. You know,
sure.
I don't care if you're suffering. They want you around. They don't want you not. I'm the same way. I want you here, bro. I don't want you not around. Period.
Mm-hmm.
So Craig is saying that he thinks BTO was 37 when he passed. Okay, that's how old I am right now. Man, that's awful young. That's awful young. Getting a text in that says, I agree with you. Everyone should try podcasting. It's therapeutic. Exactly. And I mean, at the very least, it's therapeutic. Amanda saying in the Fringe FM chat, you know, when you have anxiety, then people make you feel like there's something wrong with you because you have anxiety. And then it gives you more anxiety. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sure does.
That's true.
It gets lonelier and scarier, you know. What's wrong with you, man? You going crazy? You flipping out or something? Yeah, just don't think about it. That's what they say, right? You know, just don't think about it.
Don't think about it. Meanwhile, your body's going in every direction except for the one that you want it to go to.
So
that doesn't work that way. Oh, you know, that was so funny because I just saw a meme recently. It was like, oh, that mental illness you have, that's all in your head. And then the next scene you see is like, oh yeah, because he threw him in the river. that feeling of drowning, it's all in your chest.
Well, I had it so bad that the first few times I would hyperventilate, and it was so weird because it like that. You all right over there? You didn't have a wreck or anything, did you?
No, I grabbed the mic.
Oh, well, so what happened to me never happened before. Nobody taught me about this, but my arms started drawing up, like literally my arms went numb where I couldn't feel them. And then they drew up, like all of my hands drew up together, fingers, and they all curled up, and then they drew up to my chest. My arms.
Like palsy?
Yeah, like palsy, exactly. And my toes did the same thing. And EMT had come out there, and she was like, listen, you need to slow down your breathing. And I said, slow down my breathing. I can't breathe, you know?
Right.
And I felt literally, it felt like there were hands around my throat squeezing, you know?
Oh.
Like physically. And I said, something's choking me. And she goes, nothing is choking you. Your brain thinks that you're dying, and all the blood has went to your main organs, your brain, your heart, and your lungs. That's why your hands are drawn up like that. You're about to go into shock. And I'm like, for what? I did not know that I could think that the mind was so powerful that I could kill myself with it. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like you could. And
you can.
Yeah, and it was so scary, man. And I remember like thinking, I'll never get out of this, but you will. It's just a character test. And one of the reasons why I feel like everybody should express themselves, whether through it's blogging, podcasting, YouTubing, I don't care what you're going through. I think you should, because it'll help. Back then, I think I probably wouldn't have had anxiety if I would have been able just to talk about it to somebody, just to talk to somebody about it, about what I was thinking, what was going on.
It's a big help. It's a huge channel. It's a huge channel of therapy. I agree with you 100%. We're coming up on the top of the hour, brother.
Yes, sir, we are. And if you go to the featured host section, you'll see Dan there. And I pulled that picture, the one off of when he was fishing or something. But you're there along with Jeff and Mary and Eric. And I hope these Friday nights, especially open lines, that you can come back and join us again. Dan, it was really good to talk to you again on the show, brother.
Thank you. It was good to be on. I appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate it. You're very welcome. And tomorrow night, Grimerica will be on. Don't forget the show was produced by the Fringe FM and can't be rebroadcasted without permission. Some of y'all on YouTube are stealing my videos. I see you, right? And I'm going to get you. And also, music was by Chronox, guitar by Bundy. And we'll be back tomorrow night.
This program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.